Lightning was tearing the battlefield asunder, and it sapped the fighters of their hope of triumph. But suddenly, from the corner of their eyes, a red flame danced. Han Sen was standing there, a red flame encompassing his being. He raised his hand and 1,000 firebirds shot out, hungry for murder. There were so many of them, they covered the skies like a veil. At first, the firebirds went for the leaves. Their touch incinerated the leaves effortlessly. The fire still raged around Han Sen, and he generated more and more firebirds. When each leaf was destroyed, a bloodbird spawned out of its ashes as well. Where there was once lightning, now there was fire. The forest had become a raging inferno, all answering to the whims of the one who controlled it, Han Sen. The fire quickly overwhelmed all it came into contact with, and everything that it touched was turned to ash. From that ash, firebirds arose. It was like the spreading of a violent, parasitic infestation. The firebirds did not extinguish, either. They went on ceaselessly, incinerating the wolves with a ravenous appetite for the act. The wolves whimpered and cried out for aid, but nothing could save them. The squeals were like those of tortured souls wailing from the pits of hell. Countless wolves fell in a short amount of time. Aside from where they were standing, everything around them was ablaze. Everyone looked at Han Sen, who had become a fire-casting monstrosity. Phoenix? But Phoenix is not that powerful. He struggled to speak. He was too overwhelmed by what he was seeing. Howl. The 5 wolf kings howled to the skies once more as the lesser wolves started to scatter and run away in fear. 100 wolves and 12 trees had been burnt to a crisp in a matter of moments. The wolf kings were not going to flee, though. With an aura of blue light surrounding them, they raced towards the travelers, all from different directions. Han Sen was not going to waste any time, and he was surely not going to wait for them to close the gap. He transformed himself into a phoenix and flew forward to meet one of the kings. Hull. 7 bolts of lightning were fired towards Han Sen. That meant the wolf had opened 7 gene locks. It was a scary thing, considering the wolf had a much higher fitness level. Pang! Lightning and fire collided into a dizzying array of fireworks that exploded against each other. Han Sen did not relax his attack. He fearlessly flew towards the Wolf King, Taya in hand. The Wolf King bared its fangs to Han Sen in response, and lightning flickered across them. The beast reared its head, ready to sink its teeth into Han Sen's neck and rip out his throat. The Wolf King's mouth reached its target, and the monster brought its hungry maw down on Han Sen's neck. Strangely, not a single mark was left. The Wolf King, however, had been cut. Boom! The Wolf King twitched as blood gushed from the wound Han Sen had inflicted. It looked ready to collapse and die. Everyone was shocked, having seen Han Sen kill a sacred blood Wolf King with 7 gene locks active with a single hit. Lin Weiwei thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, and she found it difficult to believe what Han Sen had accomplished in the single year he had been in the Third God's Sanctuary. It looks as if he managed to max out his super geno points before choosing to become a surpasser. But still, he has only been here for a year. Where has all this additional power come from? Lin Weiwei retreated into her mind, as a complicated look consumed her face. Sacred blood creature lightning wolf killed.
No beast soul gun.
Consume its flesh to gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points randomly. Han Sen heard the announcement and did not relent. He went straight for another Wolf King. The Blood Pulse Sutra was quite simple. It did not matter how many gene locks it had open. It imbued the power of blood onto every skill its user performed. The more gene locks that had been opened, the stronger this boon of blood power would become. Without this skill, even with Taya, Han Sen would not have been able to take down the Wolf King in a single hit. Everyone was shocked, and even the wolves were taken aback by what had just occurred. Without hesitation, they chose to flee before any more of them became victims of the ruthless man. Han Sen caught up with one of them, and try as the Wolf King might, it was unable to avoid Han Sen's assault. His phoenix flames annihilated the 7 lightning bolts the wolf cast, as Taya was plunged deep into the furry fiend's throat. It was killed in one hit, once again. Sacred blood creature lightning wolf killed. Beast soul gained. Consume its flesh gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points randomly. The rest of the wolves managed to get away. They were terrified of Han Sen, and they scrambled wildly in their attempt to flee. To be honest, it wasn't only the wolves who were scared. Even Lin He and his people were unnerved. The power they had just witnessed was too shocking for them to comprehend. Lin He could have fought against one wolf king, but it would have been a lengthy battle. The victor of such a fight would be difficult to determine, as well. But Han Sen was able to one-hit kill a wolf king. Rarely had he ever been in such a state of speechlessness and shock. Oh my God! Brother Han is that strong? Wei Wei, didn't you tell us he had only just become a surpasser? Chun, who was flabbergasted at the ruthless spectacle he had just witnessed. I told you that because it's true. Wei Wei wasn't sure what to say anymore. But Han Sen did not have time to revel in the glory of victory because the wolves now stopped running. The wolves and wolf kings stopped their flight. They stood where they were, trembling in fear of something else. What's wrong with them now? Chun Hu wondered, with a look of confusion. Oh no, run. When Lin He discovered the unseen menace, he did not delay a single second. It's too late. Han Sen shook his head and peered into the darkness of the forest. What is too late? Chun Hu asked. It's the Wolf King, Lin Weiwei said. What about them? Wasn't Han Sen just killing them? Chun Hu's mouth had always been a little faster than his brain, and he was content to remain that way. He had never been fond of thinking. No, I'm talking about the real king. Have you ever seen a pack with 5 kings before? Lin Weiwei said.
No.
A wolf pack should only have 1 king, the alpha. Upon finishing his sentence, Chun Hu's face remained still in thought. A few seconds later, it dropped. If those wolves weren't the actual kings, then the real one had to be above sacred blood class. It might be a super creature. Having now realized what was going on, Chun Hu's face looked glum. A giant wolf emerged from the shadows of the charred trees. It was purple and without lightning. It looked like any ordinary wolf. The other wolves parted to make a path for it to approach. It was obviously all for show, a way for the wolves to display how the one nearing them was the big cheese. Han Sen looked at the purple wolf and saw the subdued gleam of purple lightning flickering in its eyes. Han Sen felt a renewed pressure, watching this wolf come closer. Everyone sweated in anticipation. If they had to fight again, they didn't think they'd have the morale to go on. They wished to run, but their legs wouldn't follow their commands. That being said, they believed it was for the best. Attempting to outrun what was most likely a super creature was folly. Everyone was petrified, and even Lin He was shivering with fear. The wolf was as strong as the spirit that had destroyed their shelter, and it sent a number of flashbacks coursing through Lin He's mind, those of the atrocities that had led them to where they were standing now. Oh, no. The real king is this powerful? Lin He sighed in his heart. The wolf walked up to Han Sen and stopped right in front of him. They both looked at each other, as if they were squaring off right before a fight. It's definitely a super creature. And that means I'll definitely have to become a super king spirit if I'm to stand a chance. Han Sen didn't want to use it because it'd render him weak, but there was little else he could do. This forest composed only one area of Ghost Mountain, and no one could promise they'd not encounter another further along their journey. As such, Han Sen really didn't want to use it. But he was accompanying Lin Weiwei, and Lin He had proven himself to be a good man. He'd feel awful if he left them behind. Daddy, Kitty. Bauer was behind Han Sen, pointing at the wolf while speaking. It's not a kitty, it's a wolf. Han Sen's smile was wry, but he did think it was amusing how she thought every furry creature was a cat. But Bauer wants Kitty. Bauer never listened, and she was determined to own everything she deemed cute. The Wolf King's hair stood on its end, and purple lightning flared up to coat its fur. It seemed upset, learning the baby believed it to be a cat. The group of travelers knew they were weaker, but they still valiantly held up their weapons for the fight that was about to ensue. Han Sen looked at the Wolf King's changing temper and prepared himself to cast his Super King Spirit Mode. The purple lightning grew brighter across the wolf's body, and it looked powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. The wolf seemed as if it was going to attack, and the lightning bubbled and boiled like the magma residing in a soon-to-erupt volcano. It made everyone take a step back. Howl! Just as Han Sen was preparing to cast his Super King Spirit Mode, something howled in the distance. It was as if all the wolves stopped breathing. And to the humans, the long howl stood out from all others they had been hearing so far. It was similar to the howl of a wolf, but it was slightly different. Strangely, when the howling came to an end, the Wolf King looked less aggressive. Its blinding light subsided, and then it turned around and left. All the wolves turned away from them and left. They disappeared into the darkness, vanishing as if nothing had happened. All the wolves had left. Before the group of travelers also continued their journey, they gathered up the carcasses of the slain Wolf Kings, and a few mutant ones, to take with them. They traveled with greater care from then on, but met no more resistance from the forest's occupants. For days later, they found the other end of that place. When it was time for supper, nobody touched the meat of the Wolf Kings. They only dined on the mutant flesh. Han Sen offered for them to eat whatever they desired, but Chun Hu told him, "You saved our hides multiple times back there. These Wolf Kings were slain by your hands only. How could we ever have the audacity to eat your food, on top of what you have already done for us?" It was a nice gesture, but Han Sen didn't really care much for the meat. He could now kill sacred blood creatures whenever he desired. And besides, with the size of those wolves, it'd most likely take him an entire month to eat them. If they didn't want to eat them, though, he wasn't going to push it. Despite leaving the lightning forest behind, they were still on Ghost Mountain. They reached a valley, eventually, where a rapid river rushed through. While they held a discussion about which way to proceed, they espied the presence of a turtle riding the stream. On its back was a human. "Is that a human or a spirit?" Lin he asked Han Sen, who was now regarded as their boss. Han Sen was able to tell them. The turtle was a sacred blood creature, and the man atop was indeed human. He could tell that the man had greater strength than the creature he was using as a surfboard. Seeing a human riding a creature in such a manner was a little strange, Han Sen thought. "He's human," Han Sen said as he watched the man. "Does that mean there might be a human shelter nearby?" Chun Hu's excitement flared up. They had managed to get through the lightning forest unscathed, though not for lack of effort on the part of the wolves. But they still wondered why they had been let go, when the super creature showed up and looked likely to attack. Whatever had occurred, the timing of the wolves' withdrawal was impeccable, and they did not think such good fortune could arise again. The man on the turtle saw the collective watching him, and he decided to approach. When he got closer, he said, "Uncle San and Wei Wei, long time no see. You know this man?" Chun Hu asked. Lin Wei Wei nodded and said, "Yes, this is Lu Yuxuan from Baojin Mining. He has been in the Third God's shelter for only 6 years, and in that time, he has already opened 8 gene locks. He is a genius, and I can't say I expected him to be here on Ghost Mountain." Lu Yuxuan quickly started a discussion with them, while ignoring all the others. "Tell me, Wei Wei, what brings you here? This place is dangerous, even for mighty elites such as myself." Lu Yuxuan spoke smugly. Lu Yuxuan was hitting on Lin Wei Wei, that much was obvious. After the question, Lin Wei Wei explained to him the events that had transpired and put them on their present course. Then, she asked, "Is there a human shelter in the nearby vicinity?" Lu Yuxuan shook his head and said, "Humans cannot dream of owning a shelter anywhere near this wretched place. There is a king-class shelter, mind you, but it is owned by a spirit, one with whom I signed a contract. Brother Lu, can you tell us which direction we might be able to go to escape this place?" People did not think poorly of him for being the slave of a spirit. It was far more common for humans to sign contracts with spirits in the Third God's shelter than to have absolute freedom with those of your own kind. Survival was the name of the game, after all. Lu Yuxuan shook his head and said, "You wish to escape this place? I don't think that's possible. I'm surprised to see you haven't been eaten by the Wolf King yet, but that's not the only super creature you should be worrying about. There are quite a few populating this mountain, and to escape their notice will be quite the task. An impossible one." Lu Yuxuan paused for a moment, and then went on to say, "Wei Wei, why don't you and your fellows come with me? I'm a valued member of the King's Spirit Shelter, and I can vouch for you all. You will be safe there." Lin Wei Wei frowned. Going there would only reduce their chances of escaping that mountain. They had risked everything and lost so much, all in the name of maintaining a hold on their freedom. Going into the service of a spirit would be like throwing in the towel, and it wouldn't feel right submitting now. Lu Yuxuan looked at Lin He and made an offer. Uncle San, I believe you are well aware of the dangers this mountain poses. Even our king's spirit master would not lurk in the territories ruled by the super creatures of this place. If you come with me, I can assure you that you will be treated well. Lin He turned around and asked, What do you think, little Han? Lu Yuxuan saw Lin He ask Han Sen and thought it strange. He looked at the young man a little more closely, as he had initially believed him to be another random nobody. This is? Lu Yuxuan asked Lin He. Lin He introduced Han Sen by saying, This is President Ji's son-in-law, Han Senator. We joined forces on the slopes of this mountain, after a chance encounter. I have heard of him before, yes. I never expected the name Han Sen to be the label of a young boy such as yourself. Lu Yuxuan feigned politeness, but the ignorance behind his words was clear to hear. After smirking at Lu Yuxuan for a second, Han Sen turned to face Lin He and answered his question. I'm not seeking employment with any spirit. I still want to leave this mountain of my own accord. Han Sen would sooner die than submit to slavery under some spirit. If anything, he would be a slave driver of spirits. Of course, Han Sen knew his powers weren't the best they could be. What's more, the instability and imbalance of his powers could be problematic. He didn't have what it took to conquer a king's spirit shelter just yet. Lu Yuxuan looked at Han Sen with disdain and said, Pa, a typical noob outlook on things. I'm afraid you have yet to learn the way things go in this sanctuary and how powerful the spirits of this place truly are. Without the power and support of many, you aren't likely to last out there. Folks who fly solo never last, and even a person such as I, with 8 gene locks open, knows it's better to get along with spirits than to fight them. Uncle San and Wei Wei, follow me to the shelter, Lu Yuxuan said, with surprising passion. He had not lied when he told them he was quite an important figure in the king's spirit shelter. But he had opened 8 gene locks, not because he was strong, but rather because the king's spirit liked him and helped him a great deal. Over the course of a few years, he had been given over 800 spirit genes. It was that generosity that allowed him to open the gene locks. He wasn't a genius. Of course, he had not received any king's spirit geno points. And that was because he hadn't signed a contract with the king's spirit. He had signed his contract with a subordinate of the king's spirit, one that had also opened 8 gene locks. But with the spirit itself having only opened 8 gene locks, that meant it was the highest Lu Yuxuan could open, as well. The king's spirit wasn't very keen on signing contracts with any random human. This king's spirit would get their subordinates to do it, and that was what had occurred for Lu Yuxuan. Brother Lu, are you certain there is no safe passage for us to leave the mountain? Lin He asked. Lin He wasn't willing to violate his own principles by submitting to Lu Yuxuan's offer, but he felt them waver. When he heard Han Sen speak up for not becoming the slave of a spirit, though, he was firm in his resolve not to go to the king's shelter. There is no safe route, so don't throw your life away. Especially on this man's accord. This guy doesn't know anything. He's barely out of his third god's sanctuary nappies. Lu Yuxuan was staring at Han Sen as he spoke. It was obvious to Lin Weiwei that he was indeed an influential figure in the shelter, but he just wanted to flex his importance to impress and seduce her. In his shelter, it was unlikely they'd be able to return to the alliance as well. In the alliance, he was nothing in the eyes of the Lin family. Here, things were different, and he had a much better chance of wooing her. He didn't care for the well-being of the others. More than anything, he just wanted to bring her back to the shelter so he could have her sign a contract with the spirit he knew. Then, no matter what, she'd be unable to escape him. And if he played his cards right, fun with Lin Weiwei wouldn't be the only thing he could have. He could end up having some of the other humans as subordinates for himself. If they didn't behave, they'd be killed. Their lives in the alliance would have already been forfeited. Anyway, are you positive there aren't any safe routes? Lin Weiwei asked. Yes. So, please, don't do this. Lu Yuxuan started to act all upset and went on to say, the mountain is too dangerous. If you insist on trying to cross its perilous terrain, you really will lose your life. A grisly death is all that will await you. If you come with me, I can make it so you can get to the alliance whenever you wish. And if you don't like the shelter, once you're in the alliance, just don't return. Lu Yuxuan was not dumb, and he wouldn't start an argument with them. But in his heart he thought, "Mwahaha, once you're in the shelter with me, you'll never visit the Alliance again." Lu Yuxuan did not start a fight because the 8 gene locks he had opened were solely from the spirit genes, and as such, he'd most likely be weaker than some of his opponents when it came to actual battle. Lin he had opened 7 gene locks, but they were earned the old-fashioned way. As such, he'd likely wreck the conniving wretch. That's why he was trying to trick them into coming to the shelter. Once they were there, he could do whatever he wished to them. Hearing what Lu Yuxuan had told them, Chanhu was tempted to go with the man. After all, he was told he could visit the Alliance whenever he wished. Ghost Mountain was a wicked place, and going back to the Alliance with your life was a fair option. And once in the Alliance, the leash of the contract was ineffective. They could just forfeit their lives in the sanctuary and live in the Alliance forever. Not being able to grow stronger was a better choice than being killed. Chinhu and a few others showed great interest in going, so they asked Lu Yuxuan for many details. "You see this sacred blood turtle? The King Spirit gave it to me as a gift. He's a stellar bloke. If he treated humans like thralls, would he have given this to me?" Lu Yuxuan's words were creamy, and his ploy was more than convincing. Chunhu then turned to Han Sen and said, "Come on, brother Han. We should go there together." Again, Han Sen reaffirmed his goal with a shake of his head. "I am leaving this place," he said. "Me too. I've come too far to turn back now," Lin Weiwei said. Chunhu gritted his teeth and said, "Well, if you guys are going, it'd be unkind of me to remain. We've been through a lot together, and on this road, there'll undoubtedly be more hell to endure. And if that's the case, I'm going to be right by your side and not miss a second of it." The offer had been very tempting, but when the time to make a decision came, everyone still decided to remain with Han Sen. Lin he said, "Brother Lu, I thank you for the offer, but we decline. The kindness you wish to show us is a testament to your good heart. And if your heart is as good as I have been led to believe, then you will point us to the path of least resistance. Tell us which way will let us leave this mountain the easiest, and we'll owe you big time." Lu Yuxuan did not expect everyone to end up following Han's senator. He had clearly underestimated his influence. Lu Yuxuan was fuming on the inside, but he still feigned a weak smile, as if his ulterior motive had not just been foiled. He told them, "I truly admire your courage. Unfortunately, I cannot guide you away from this place entirely, but I can lead you for 300 miles and make sure no harm falls upon you. I will guarantee your safety."
Han Sen calmly observered Liu Yuxuan.
Han Sen was dexterous in the arts of assassination, and when his jade skin had allowed him to open his 8th sense, he gained the ability to detect any hostile feelings towards him. Although Lu Yuxuan had hit it well, Han Sen could sense he meant to do him harm. Of course, Han Sen did not say anything just yet. The road they would go along together had to be safe, because schemers and backstabbers like Lu Yuxuan rarely put themselves in dangerous situations. Everyone followed him, and as he led the way, many creatures came into sight. When they saw the turtle, though, they ran off and posed no threat. "With me here, nothing for the next 300 miles will lay a finger on any of you." Watch the creatures run off. Lu Yuxuan puffed his chest up and spoke with an arrogant tone of voice. "It's nice to have you here with us," Wang Yu said. "Soon, we'll be passing through the territory of a super creature. But again, you needn't worry. I, Lu Yuxuan, am here to safeguard you all." He continued to speak with the same snobbish mannerisms. Lin He and Lin Weiwei responded with simple grace, saying, "Thank you for your service." "Well, we are friends, aren't we? I am especially fond of you, my dear Weiwei. This is the least I can do for you," Lu Yuxuan said. In his heart, his real emotions were actually like curdled milk. He snickered to himself, saying, "That super creature is a good friend of mine, and I often please his son. He'll do me a favor, for sure. Once I get him to deal with the rest of this annoying congregation, I can whisk Weiwei home to my bedroom chamber. And I'm not letting Han Sen get off the hook by granting him a swift death. They'd all be on their way to the shelter right now, if it wasn't for that snotty brat. He'll die slow." Thinking of his bestiality fetish, a pleasurable chill ran down Lu Yuxuan's spine. Then, he looked over to Han Sen. Han Sen was, much to his surprise, was looking his way as well. He was smiling, but that smile almost felt as if he had been able to read his mind. Has he noticed something amiss? Does he know what I'm up to? Lu Yuxuan was spooked. He mulled it over a bit, and then comforted himself by saying, "Pa, that is preposterous. He doesn't know a thing. He's a noob that somehow fumbled his way into the third god's sanctuary. I should ease up a bit." Lu Yuxuan presented a smile back and said, "There is no need for you to worry, Brother Han. I can keep you safe." "Gee, thanks," Han Sen said in response. "Fool. Even if you did max out your Super Geno points, here you are, waltzing into my trap without a single suspicion. You numbnuts?" Lu Yuxuan thought to himself, cackling on the inside. Cliffs adorned both sides of the valley, and there were many caves dotted across them. There were many winged beasts in the area, and a few thousand of them populated the skies. The group was a little nervous and antsy, seeing that many creatures were lingering above them. "Again, there is no need to worry," Lu Yuxuan said, then screamed into the skies. After that, all the beasts returned to the caves as if they were afraid. Then, they just watched from the darkness of their holes. "You are good," Wang Yu said. "Later, I will summon the super creature Sun. He'll come over and meet us. Under his protection, we can travel further along the valley. Nothing will attack us then." Lu Yuxuan's tone of voice was already changing, as if he had a mouthful of plums. He had spent a long time studying the language of creatures. After much time, he had learned a fair few words, and this was a talent few people had. To his credit, he was a smart man. Few humans were ever treated with even a modicum of respect in spirit shelters. Lu Yuxuan had done well for himself to have gotten to the position he was in. What's more, his skills of observation were in fine shape. He let out another scream to summon the super creature Sun. This scream was different, though, and in the language of creatures, he mentioned he had brought a grand bounty of food with him. Except for Lin Weiwei, everyone else was up for sacrifice. No one there spoke the language of creatures, so no one had a clue what to expect. After the scream, an echo of response came from further down the valley. A red beast appeared and came before them. It had blood-colored wings that were 30 meters wide, and horns decorated the monster's head like those of a goat. Chen Hu, upon seeing this, couldn't help blurting out, "Wow, you really are good." Han Sen had fantastic eyesight, and he saw a small beast atop the big beast's back. Lu Yuxuan's face changed when he saw the big beast appear. He had only wished to summon the super creature's Sun. He hadn't expected he'd end up summoning the big one that the sun rode upon. He rarely ever got to see the king, and he was only used to interacting with the sun. Lu Yuxuan would have had some control over what happened if only the sun had shown up, as he had planned. With the Bloodwing Beast King there, as well, he'd be helpless in controlling what might happen. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the presence of a sacrifice. I think a simple summoning of the sun would have been better. Lu Yuxuan thought the Beast King had come over upon hearing there'd be much food on offer. Whatever happened next was entirely up to the hulking, airborne monstrosity. He could only hope it'd leave Lin Weiwei alone. If the beast wanted to eat Lin Weiwei, as heartbreaking as it'd be, he knew better than to protect her. He only wanted her as a pretty toy, and it wasn't worth risking his life for her. Seeing the Bloodwing Beast King nearing, Lu Yuxuan quickly kowtowed before it and made a few subservient sounds. He had only wanted to summon the Beast King's son, due to the fact the two shared something of a bond. Now, he had to tarnish his own image of being strong and influential to the creatures of the domain by going down on the ground. But Lu Yuxuan knew what to prioritize with the Beast King's unexpected approach. He'd rather discard his image than his life. If he was disrespectful towards the king, he could provoke its finicky wrath and end up as its tea-time meal. Han Sen didn't care much for the two-faced man, making a fool of himself on the ground. He was a dead man walking, as it was. Chen Hu, on the other hand, saw things differently. He was touched by what Lu Yuxuan was doing, believing his act wasn't one of self-preservation. He believed he had gone on the ground to kowtow on his behalf, and the others that were with him. Boom! The Beast King landed before them all. Lu Yuxuan did not relent in his feverish kowtowing, but the king paid no heed to him. It walked towards Han Sen, at which point, the sun leapt off its parent's back. Lu Yuxuan wished to remind the king that, If it was hungry, Lin Weiwei was not one to be eaten. But he was having cold feet about telling the king anything. Seeing how mighty and powerful it looked, he thought it best to shut up completely and not say a word. Han Sen looked at the beast that was approaching, thinking he'd use Lu Yuxuan as a meat shield if a fight started. Eat them all up. Just please, save me the delicious Lin Weiwei. Lu Yuxuan thought to himself. But what happened next went against all of his expectations. The Beast King, after coming directly in front of Han Sen, performed a friendly gesture of respect. Neither Lu Yuxuan nor anyone else could understand what was going on, and why the Beast King was acting that way towards Han Sen. How? Lu Yuxuan's breath had been yanked from his lungs. Even king spirits were afraid of this creature, so it was difficult for him to fathom why it'd show so much respect towards Han Senator. He thought he must have been having a nightmare. No one else spoke the language of beasts, but there was no hostility between the two parties, and the tension that once existed quickly vanished. Chan Hu hurriedly asked, "Mr. Lu, can you translate what it is trying to tell us?" Lu Yuxuan was so shocked, he didn't hear a word Chan Hu said. But the shock wasn't going to end anytime soon. What happened next made him dizzy. The Beast King's son ran towards Han Sen and leapt into his arms. It placed a red fruit in his hand. Seeing this, Lu Yuxuan felt blood rush to his head in such volume that it felt like his head was going to explode. I must be dreaming. I must be. This must all be a bad dream. Why would he give a blood fruit to a human? Lu Yuxuan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he eyed the fruit in Han Sen's hand with envy. The king's spirit once asked Lu Yuxuan to deliver gifts and treasures to the beast, in the hopes of one day receiving such a fruit in return for the kindness. But the spirit had yet to be given a single one, despite the repeated offerings that were provided. Lu Yuxuan had only glimpsed the Beast King once before, too, as he was never allowed in its presence. This had gone on for quite some time, but the king's spirit never thought to stop. The fruit really was that valuable. Constant gifts with an expected return never given. The king's spirit, despite his grand efforts, did not receive a single one. But here, now, Han Sen was handed one oh so simply. Lu Yuxuan's mind was suffering a meltdown. The Beast King's son licked Han Sen's cheek in admiration, and its tail wagged with unbridled joy. Lu Yuxuan's mind recalled how each of his visits with the son usually went, in that it always used him as a faucet of blood. Every time they were together, he would have to allow it to sink its teeth in him so that could it drink his blood. It always acted superior, as well, vastly different to the puppy dog-like behavior it was showing Han Sen. Han Sen stroked the Beast King's son's head and asked, "Is this fruit for me?" The Beast King's son seemed to enjoy the hand was that caressing it softly, and it made a gentle sound. Then, it nodded in confirmation. Lu Yuxuan's shock had turned to jealousy, but now, it turned to anger. The creatures never replied to him whenever he spoke the human language. That was the whole reason he taught himself how to communicate in the language of creatures, in the first place. D**m in it. D**m in that asterisk shoal. His face was still on the ground, and he did not dare get up. He couldn't at all wrap his mind around why the two creatures would show so much love and respect towards a human they had never seen before. Bauer, seeing the Beast King's son being so friendly, wanted to show it some love, too. She crawled up to it and rubbed her face in its lovely mane. This did nothing to upset the disposition of the Beast King's son, or the Beast King itself, either. Things were as peaceful as ever, and the son decided to lick Bauer a little, as well. Han Sen was surprised by the entire affair, also. He had gotten himself ready for a fight, so the lack of hostilities came as a delightful shock. The blood fruit he had been given looked immensely powerful. It looked far superior to the ones birthed by Devil King seeds, or any of the ones found in the Valley of Time. Roar! The Beast King suddenly roared, and after it did, many small creatures flocked to the valley as if they were in celebration of Han Sen's coming. With the Beast King protecting them, the group traveled through the valley for a few hundred miles, entirely unhindered. But when they exited the valley, it was no longer the dominion of the Bloodwing Beast King. When it was time to say goodbye, the king leapt onto a rock and gave a faint cry of sadness and farewell. "Mr. Lu, I thank you. You have greatly opened our eyes. Chunhu said. He believed the beasts were so kind because of Lu Yuxuan's behavior. With a forced smile, Lu Yuxuan pretended that had been the case and said, "You are welcome. Brother Lu, when we return to the Alliance, we will send you a reward in return for your kind deeds. But if I may ask, where do we go from here?" Lin he knew it wasn't actually Lu Yuxuan who had made the Beast King so friendly, but he was still oblivious to his evil thoughts and intentions. So, he just went along with his credit-taking and thanked him. "Well, that's me. Helpful as always." Lu Yuxuan smiled and went on to say, "There is a path you do well to take, just up ahead. Come, I will lead you there." "Ah, in that case, we thank you again," Chunhu said. Lu Yuxuan then turned to ask Han Sen, "Have you seen the Bloodwing Beast King before?" "No," Han Sen shook his head. Lu Yuxuan had no reason to believe Han Sen was lying. Is this guy the luckiest man in existence, or what? Why would this brat be given a blood fruit? Lu Yuxuan did his best to contemplate why. Lu Yuxuan forced another smile and tried to weasel his way into getting a nibble of it. He said, "That blood fruit is a gift for everyone. Why don't you share it?" Cheekily, having not received it, he tried to lie and say it was something that belonged to everyone. If Han Sen was willing to share, it meant he'd be given a slice. With a fruit so brilliant as that, even a small nibble would be wondrous. If Han Sen was not willing to share, others might end up upset. They might even revolt against the man they all seemed to be blindly following. "I gave it to Bauer."
Han Sen pointed at her.
Lu Yuxuan had only focused on Han Sen the entire time, not noticing Bauer was munching away at the fruit as its juice stained her cheeks. "How could you?" He was unable to hold his tongue and feign kindness at this point, and like a sudden barking, he yelled at Han Sen. He was infuriated to learn that Han Sen had fed a fruit that was greatly desired by a king's spirit to what he deemed a useless pet. "I shouldn't have done that."
Han Sen smiled.
Han Sen had actually tried having some earlier, but it had no effect. When Bauer showed him she really wanted it, he had no problem giving it to her. "Let her have it. We don't need it, anyway," Chunhu said. The Beast King provided it to Han Sen as a gift. It was his to decide who should or who should not receive some. Lin Weiwei spoke out, in defense of his decision. She could tell Lu Yuxuan hadn't actually helped them, as well. If the king had really been nice to them because of his kowtowing, the fruit would have been given to him. Seeing that he had lost his temper this way, Lin Weiwei was now positive her hypothesis was correct. With everyone else also saying they did not mind not having it, Lu Yuxuan was again left struggling to comprehend why everyone was so supportive of Han Sen. Seeing Lin Weiwei looking at him, Lu Yuxuan tried to swallow his flaring temper and gently explain, "It can merely benefit the human body, that's all. I just thought it was a shame to give it to a pet. It's fine. I treat her like a daughter anyway," Han Sen said.
"Fine."
"Whatever. Let's keep walking." Lu Yuxuan marched ahead as soon as he finished his sentence. Lu Yuxuan went with a smile, but inside, he was thinking, "F***, that's it. I'm not allowing any of you to live. That asterisk shoal Han Sen must die." Lu Yuxuan despised Han Sen more than ever, and the fact he had ruined his plans was driving him nuts. He wanted them all dead, especially since they had seen him shamelessly kowtow in front of a super creature. He hadn't told anyone which shelter he actually came from, fortunately. But regardless, he wasn't going to allow anyone there to walk away and possibly mention the shameless act they had seen from him. But these thoughts and desires were all manic concoctions of his disturbed mind. No one thought anything ill of his behavior so far. They actually appreciated his willingness to go down on the ground in a subservient manner before the Beast King. They might not have known his true intentions, but still, that was besides the fact. Right now, though, Lu Yuxuan was leading them to a dead end. They were headed to the territory of another super creature. It was another place the king's spirit would not dare tread. Compared to the Bloodwing Beast King, this super creature was 10 times more ferocious, Lu Yuxuan reckoned. It was known to kill and gorge on whatever living thing came near its lair. Not even the bones of its victims would be left uneaten. When they were almost there, Lu Yuxuan stopped and pointed in the direction, saying, "I can't lead you any further. Beyond is where you should head, and not soon after, you'll be led away and off the mountain." Be careful on your way, lest you make your presence known to the king's spirit. Lu Yuxuan was lying, of course. The super creature was said to lurk directly ahead of the party now. He had no actual clue where the mountain's exit might have resided, and he had no idea what was past the doom-bringing beast he was leading them to. Not that it mattered to him. Mr. Lu, wait. After everyone thanked him for his guidance, and he was ready to turn away and leave, Han Sen stopped him from going. What is it, Brother Han? Lu Yuxuan asked, looking back at Han Sen. There is something I need your help with before your departure, Han Sen said. I'll certainly help if I am able to. What is it? Lu Yuxuan said. What happened next would be up to him to decide. Take us further, Han Sen said, looking at Lu Yuxuan sternly. At this request, his face changed, and he said, well, like I said, I would like to help you. Unfortunately, I am not too familiar with these roads. But, should you proceed this way and meet some misfortune, you can come back and seek me out. The offer for you staying at my shelter still stands. Lin Yuxuan's tone of voice bordered one of mocking, as if he was trying to make Han Sen seem as if he was scared. I have no problem going further, but you need to come with me, Han Sen said. Lu Yuxuan was suddenly angered by the persistence of this request, and he moodily said, Uncle San and Wei Wei, did you hear what he just said? I am not one of you people, but I have helped you get this far out of the kindness of my heart. Haven't I done enough for you? I even kowtowed on your behalf. What, do you expect me to die for you lot, too? Lin he looked at Han Sen and said, Brother Lu, calm down. I'm sure you have misinterpreted little Han's words. Chill for a minute and hear him out in full. He didn't misunderstand. He has to come with us. Han Sen spoke plainly. You are crazy. Who do you think you are by telling me what to do? At this point, Lu Yuxuan was yelling at the top of his voice. He went on to shout, Uncle San, Wei Wei, do you hear what he is saying? This guy is King impossible to please. He wants even more? Dogs would show a greater appreciation than this boy. Han Sen coldly said, I am crazy. I have been for a long time. Are you only just learning that now? The boy has a death wish. But whatever, I'm done with you. Lu Yuxuan did his best to speak poorly of Han Sen, trying to discourage the group of travelers from supporting Han Sen any further. No matter how powerful Han Sen had become, he had been in the third god's sanctuary for a year. Most people would have only suspected him to have opened 3 gene locks at the most. Although Lu Yuxuan's gene locks were weak, he still had 8 of them. And what's more, he had a sacred blood turtle. Lu Yuxuan's body was burning with a fire of utter hatred and contempt for Han Sen, and he growled, You're so cocky. You think you're the best, don't you? Come on, show me what you got. Others thought to say something, but before they could, Han Sen swung his fist. Han Sen knew why Lu Yuxuan was behaving the way he was, and he knew the man had a secret desire to get them all killed. What's more, Han Sen was not a fan of negotiation. When he encountered a heated confrontation with someone he deemed evil, a quick fist was Han Sen's favored method of achieving resolution. Han Sen's fist traveled with a fire. Seeing it come, Lu Yuxuan transformed into a flaming snake that lunged at Han Sen. The snake was 10 meters long, and all Han Sen had was a fiery fist. The scene certainly looked unbalanced, but when the 2 fiery figures collided, Lu Yuxuan was the one given the most shock. Boom! Han Sen hit the flaming snake and ignited the body with the searing flame of a far crueler power. Lu Yuxuan dropped to the ground, rolling around on the grass and screaming in agony. He managed to utter a command to his turtle, which then attacked Han Sen. The turtle's first move was shooting water towards Han Sen. This attack was rapidly dodged, and in retaliation, Han Sen jumped to the turtle's head with tail in hand. Catcha! The turtle's head was sliced off with ease. Blood squirted from the red, rhythmic pumping of its exposed throat. Sacred blood creature armored turtle killed. Beast soul gained. Consume its flesh to gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points randomly. Lu Yuxuan continued rolling around on the ground, but the fire that was ruining his body refused to be put out. Han Sen picked him up and got rid of the flames himself, but the man was heavily damaged. Lu Yuxuan's 8 gene locks were nothing compared to Han Sen. Lu Yuxuan pretended to be a victim in this entire ordeal, crying tears while proclaiming, "Uncle San, Wei Wei, Shan Hu, I helped you. What did I do to deserve this treatment?" He made himself look so wronged. Others actually felt pity for him. Maybe there really was a misunderstanding. Lin he did believe Han Sen had been a little too cruel on him. But Lin he trusted Han Sen's judgment, and he knew there had to be a reason Han Sen was so willing to lash out against Lu Yuxuan. "I will explain later. You guys remain here." Han Sen continued down the path, dragging Lu Yuxuan along with him. Lu Yuxuan yelled for help from the others, but he didn't get any. Eventually, as Han Sen pulled him nearer the place he wished for them to meet their doom, he quieted down. He was scared now. He was terrified of waking up the super creature that was said to lurk there. Lu Yuxuan, at this point, knew Han Sen had figured out what he had been up to. It had to be the reason why he had been dragged there like that. But Lu Yuxuan believed Han Sen's determined march into that wicked territory was merely a bluff. He thought Han Sen wouldn't risk going too far forward. If Han Sen could not provide his party an explanation for what he had done, Lu Yuxuan thought there might be a chance to turn them all against each other and possibly crawl away from this entire affair with his life. Seeing Han Sen continue to walk forward, not slowing down for a single second, Lu Yuxuan was moving from afraid to terrified. It didn't help that Han Sen had remained silent the entire time, as well. Most people that found themselves being suddenly dragged away against their will by an angry man would object quite loudly, but Lu Yuxuan remained as quiet as he could. There was a risk he was trying to avoid, despite thinking Han Sen's bluff was still in play. Lin He and Lin Weiwei could see the two from where they were, and they watched intently. They were still a little unsure about what had motivated and instigated Han Sen's aggression, but they knew there was more to this than met the eye. Lu Yuxuan's eyes were wide open now, having realized Han Sen had strolled directly into the area the beast was said to feast on intruders. "You're crazy. That's it. We have to go. We have to go now, or else we die." Lu Yuxuan finally spoke, and his voice wasn't at normal volume. It was a scream, one driven by an intense fear of imminent death. Han Sen stopped, looked at the wriggling worm, and said, "Why would we die? I thought you said this is a safe road, and that our exit from the mountain is just beyond here. Do it. Just do it. Get out. Leave this place." Lu Yuxuan was writhing around with what looked like a broken mind. He really didn't want to die, and he was utterly terrified of the concept of waking up the super creature that was said to live there. "Leave? Leave here? Give me one good reason to." Han Sen was slowly starting to walk forward again. "You are crazy. It's a dead end, not an exit. And only death will await us both if you continue going forward." Even the deaf could have heard Lu Yuxuan's hopeless crying, and so pretty swiftly, his scheme was revealed to the party that watched from afar. If it wasn't for Han Sen, they all would have merrily walked into a trap, still thinking Lu Yuxuan was a decent fellow. Han Sen turned around and dragged him back to Lin He. Then, he threw him onto the ground. Asterisk Shoal, why do you want to hurt us? Chunhu was furious at this revelation. Run, run. Lu Yuxuan believed the creature must have woken up by now. It would be best we stay away from this area for now. Come, let's backtrack a bit, Han Sen said. Lin He agreed, saying, "Yes, Chunhu, everyone, let's go." But suddenly, the sound of a wicked scream and an explosion was heard from far behind them. "We are dead because of you." Lu Yuxuan yelled at Han Sen, as if he was a victim. Han Sen frowned at the emergence of a new threat, but he was not afraid. The sound was loud, and the noise of something hissing was quickly drawing near. A white snake came into view. It was like a cross between a white cobra and a dragon. The head possessed a unicorn horn and ice-like eyes. The scales of its form were like threaded diamonds. The monster was as beautiful as it was scary. Nobody's legs could move, though, and it felt as if something was keeping them from fleeing. The creature was infinitely more frightening than the blood-winged beast king they had previously encountered. In the presence of that monster, they could not even think about running. Even Lin He felt his body stiffen, and all he could do was remain still, watching the snake approach. The snake looked at the crowd and hissed. Its forked tongue rattled in the open maw. As everyone looked on, they were sapped of their hope of survival. Lu Yuxuan looked as if he belonged in an asylum. He was crazy, mumbling and dribbling in fear. He repeatedly blubbered, "That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over." In the next second, the white dragon moved in front of Han Senator. Everyone thought he would be the first to go, regretfully. The snake pulled out its tongue and touched his body. Han Sen was able to move the entire time, but he had chosen not to. He knew the beautiful white snake was not actually going to be hostile at all. He had, of course, at first prepared to fight. But as the snake drew nearer and nearer, he was able to realize there was no aggressive intent in its approach. Amidst everyone's mounting shock, a white mushroom fell out of the snake's mouth and into Han Sen's hands. Then, the snake lowered its head in front of him. "Is this for me?" Han Sen looked at the mushroom with confusion. The mushroom was very big, and the life force it possessed was no joke. It was incredibly strong. Simply smelling it was enough to bring a person's mind great comfort, and it looked so delicious, Han Sen thought he could hear his cells moaning and groaning for a taste. It was lucky the super creatures had no intention of harming him, but Han Sen couldn't yet understand why that was. And stranger yet, why were they delivering him gifts? Having also received the blood fruit earlier, he now thought to himself, "Does Lady Luck simply have a crush on me? Is this her work?" Lu Yuxuan was frozen for a different reason now. He watched what occurred with immeasurable shock. He exclaimed, "Impossible! Dragon saliva!"
Impossible.
Everyone looked at Han Sen strangely. They now knew for sure that the Bloodwing Beast King really had only cared for Han Sen. Suddenly, though, the white snake grabbed Han Senator. They believed it was going to eat him for a second, but that spike of fear was quickly alleviated. It had only grabbed Han Sen by his clothes, and gently, it placed him on its back. It had decided to guide him through the next region of the mountain. Seeing Han Sen atop the white snake, Lu Yuxuan's broken mind seemed to completely shatter. He muttered, "This must be a nightmare. I have to wake up. This must really be just a bad dream." Han Sen had his people bring the body of the slain turtle and Lu Yuxuan with them. They followed the snake he rode upon through the region the creature presided over. Bauer climbed ahead of Han Sen, sitting directly on the snake's head. She held the creature's horn, which worried the others. If her behavior angered the white snake, no one could imagine what wrath might be brought down upon them. Lu Yuxuan spoke a lot about how cruel and evil the white snake supposedly was, but from what they were actually seeing, his words couldn't be further from the truth. It didn't mind Bauer climbing all over it, and it continued leading them in a delightfully tame and kind manner without an ounce of hostility. It went quickly, though. Lin He and his fellows often had trouble keeping up, but it seemed to acknowledge their existence by slowing down for them, every now and again. The group traversed this portion of the mountain without a single incident. All was well and all was safe. When it had gone as far as it could, it gently allowed Bauer and Han Sen to disembark. Then, it returned to its domain as swiftly as it had initially left it. "Brother Han, why do super creatures treat you like this? Were you once a renowned super creature king in a past life?" Chen Hu asked, in equal parts amusement and awe. Everyone seemed to be a little dazed by what was going on. No one had ever seen or even heard of a human receiving such treatment from creatures before. "If I told you I didn't know why they treated me this way, would you believe me?"
Han Sen asked.
Lin Weiwei just smiled and said, "I'd believe you. Super creatures are unpredictable, to say the least. But perhaps there is an item in your possession that attracts them to you." "That most certainly sounds like a feasible possibility," Lin He added. Their comments reminded Han Sen that he did indeed have something special on him, but it was something he had brought with him from the second god's sanctuary. The only special item he had acquired recently was the dragon blood ring. But if his possession of that was why, then neither the wolf nor the monkeys would have attacked him. Han Sen, unable to understand, shelved those thoughts for the time being. "Well, Han Sen, is it time we decide what to do with this asterisk shoal? Should we kill him and be done with it?" Wang Yu said, with a tone of utter contempt. The jig was up for Lu Yuxuan, and it had been revealed to them all how much of a spiteful, twisted, backstabbing liar he truly was. The region they had crossed with the snake was nothing like he described. "Don't kill me. I just don't like Han Sen, that's all. I only tried to get rid of him. Lu Yuxuan was on his knees, sobbing for mercy. Little Han, what will you do? Lin He asked. Kill him. Lin Weiwei, now understanding what he had planned to do, was in great relief she had not decided to follow him to the shelter. We'll take him with us for now. If something seeks to attack or kill us, he'll make a fine decoy, Han Sen coldly said. To Han Sen, he was a dead man already. The only reason Han Sen was going to allow him to live a little longer was so his death could prove at least somewhat useful. Hearing what Han Sen said, they each thought it to be the best course of action. They did not have any more ideas or opinions to share. A while later, they all stopped for a rest. Since there were hungry stomachs all around, Han Sen got to preparing a meal from the turtle he had slain. The turtle was a fairly big creature, so it was going to prove too big for Han Sen to eat all by himself. As such, he offered some of the cooked turtle to the others, and they each accepted a portion. Bauer looked excited, eating the turtle. She had developed a great taste for meat. While everyone ate and dined merrily, though, creatures approached them. A white, sacred blood deer walked up to Han Sen and placed down a clump of holy grass in front of him. Then, it left. It wasn't long until other creatures showed up, bringing with them the carcass of a creature they had hunted. They laid it down in front of Han Sen and walked away as well. Han Sen cooked the creature he had been provided, and he was delighted to learn it was a sacred blood creature, too. Lu Yuxuan had no clue why all the creatures of the mountains, those he had once believed to be utterly wretched, wished to please Han Sen. Everywhere Han Sen went, creatures welcomed him. He received an abundance of gifts over the course of their travel, all beyond their wildest expectations. Little San, you must have been quite the romantic creature lover in a past life, Lin Weiwei said. I must have worked hard, all day and night, to please the number of creatures that seek to reward me. Han Sen gave her a wry smile. Maybe you were just a popular figure, adored by all? Lin Weiwei suggested. Yep, I can believe it. Everyone must love Brother Han, Chunhu said, in admiration. Han Sen replied to them both, saying, maybe in a past life, I was their king. King? Lin Weiwei shook her head. Then, she said, no, more like a celebrity. Yep, a celebrity, Chunhu said. Han Sen wasn't actually a believer in the concept of reincarnation. He knew there was a reason for the kindness being shown towards him by the creatures, but he just couldn't figure out what it was. But at least it made for a pleasant journey. Encountering creatures was no longer a problem for them, and the fear that first plagued their journey had vanished. Before Han Sen, every creature was tame and gentle. They went on in this manner for quite some time. They traveled for an entire month, and they moved at a quick pace. Their lives were better than they had been, even when they were living in a human shelter. Han Sen had eaten 2 whole wolf kings, some turtle, and a variety of other meats given to him by creatures. In total, his sacred blood geno point tally managed to reach 56. Although Han Sen had received many presents from the creatures of the regions he and his party traversed, none of those gifts had yet surpassed the blood fruit and dragon saliva in terms of rarity and power. Those gifts, given to him by super creatures, were by far the best. Upon nearing the exit of Ghost Mountain, they encountered another super creature. It was a giant ape, and it provided Han Sen with a small wine cup. Han Sen could tell it was actually a geno item, but despite his close examinations of it, he couldn't really tell what purpose it might serve him. The giant ape also aided them in travel. He grabbed a hold of every member of Han Sen's party and placed them all atop his shoulders. Then, he took off running for 4 days straight. The craggy slopes of the mountain soon gave way to an emerald, verdant expanse that was home to a number of horses, merrily grazing away the hours of sunshine. We are finally off Ghost Mountain. Everyone was exuberantly happy. The ape placed them down, roared at Han Sen, and then returned to the mountain. Looking back to where they had spent so much time traveling, it was almost like a dream. Everything they had been through seemed unbelievable, even to Han Sen. Arg! Just as everyone was in chirpy spirits, a scream sounded from their midst. Lu Yuxuan was rolling on the ground in pain, shrieking in agony. A wound had formed on his body, as if something had cut him badly. He was covered in blood, yet no one around him had done a thing. As Lu Yuxuan screamed, he barely looked human. His body was being skinned by a phantom aggressor, and soon, his flesh started to get carved away in large chunks. Soon, it'd be down to the bone. The wounds were not fatal, though. Kill me, please. I was wrong. I wanted Wei Wei, and yet I was willing to harm and kill you to have her. Lu Yuxuan's face was distorted and covered in blood. But the torture he was now under was so unbearable. He actually wanted to die. Everyone understood what was happening. The spirit that owned Lu Yuxuan must have detected that he had left Ghost Mountain. Thinking that it was an act of disobedience, the spirit started to torture him. He grabbed his sword and plunged it deep into Lu Yuxuan's heart. As his life force left his body, his muscles relaxed and his face became softer. He looked free, as if he had been granted a release he had long wanted. There was no need for him to suffer. We are still the same kind. He may have deserved death, but not one that was brutally prolonged, he explained.
Han Sen nodded.
Even though he despised Lu Yuxuan and would have killed the man himself, he wouldn't have tortured him. The others, seeing the way he died, were in shock. They were eternally glad they had not returned to the shelter and submitted themselves to the command of a spirit. One day, they could have ended up just like Lu Yuxuan. To avoid his body being desecrated by creatures, Han Sen torched it until there was nothing left but dust. When it was time for them to set out again, they were not too sure where to go. The only thing in front of them was a flat, plain field that went on as far as the eyes could see. So they picked a direction and went straight ahead. The horse-like creatures were afraid of the passing humans, it seemed. Before they even got close, the horses would run off and maintain a lengthy distance. After a while of travel, they suddenly heard a buzzing noise. Something gold was coming towards them from across the expanse. At first, it was alone, but later, more of the golden things appeared. After squinting to get a better look, the group saw that the creatures were golden, fist-sized bugs, and their numbers were many. More and more emerged, until they started to blot out the sun and ink the sky. But since they were gold, they did not darken the field they traversed. Instead, the brightness of the region only increased. The area became almost blindingly bright. I wonder what these things will give us? Chunhu looked very excited. Although Chunhu did not personally receive any gifts or reap any specific benefits, he was excited to see what new thing they would bring. But Han Sen was not in this mindset. His face changed and he said, "They are not here to bring gifts. Everyone, get ready to fight." No way. Chunhu could not believe it. The golden bugs closed in on them quickly. They swooped down low and tried to bite them in a hungry swarm. With their gene locks open, the fighters raised their weapons to counter the assault. Han Sen was ablaze with a red fire, and he commanded a phoenix to incinerate the bugs that were directly in front of him. But the golden bugs were strange. When the phoenix slew them, it did not respawn and allow Han Sen another usage. Even stranger, there was no announcement after the bugs died, and his Dongxian aura revealed nothing on those bugs. He didn't learn a thing. The group of travelers unleashed everything they had as they fought back against the tide of insects, but the enemy's numbers were too many. If a bug landed on one of their bodies, even mutant armor wasn't an effective enough resistance for the subsequent biting. The bugs would tear through their bodies in an instant. Screams started to erupt from the group. When Han Sen turned to look at those who cried out, he found them soaked in blood. Han Sen tried his best. He always did, but he knew he could not protect everyone this time. Han Sen gifted the turtle armor beast soul to Lin Weiwei and said, "Put this on." After donning the armor, she was far safer, and she felt that way too. The golden bugs could no longer nibble their way through that protection, but it did nothing to alleviate the enormous swarm that assaulted the rest. There were so many, it was almost like a sandstorm of the fiends. And as for how they might get out of this predicament, Han Sen was short on ideas. Arg! The people screamed. Many of the bugs were attached to Wang Yu's legs, which were being ravenously gnawed. Within a few seconds, nothing but the bones remained. He collapsed to the ground. On the ground, his ability to resist was drastically reduced. Countless more of the bugs swarmed his defenseless body. He was being ravaged, and in a few seconds, ransacked bones were all that would remain. Han Sen's body surged with red fire, and the bugs that swarmed around Wang Yu were blackened and burnt. The man had been saved, but only barely. He could not stand up, let alone fight. Chun, who was next in line to suffer, though, he screamed, and Han Sen watched as he fell to the ground. A fireball was sent his way, incinerating the hungry bugs that sought to do him harm. Han Sen was managing for now, but he knew he couldn't save everyone. "Bauer, get these bugs," Han Sen pleaded, but the baby did not move. Her eyes seemed fixed on something. Han Sen knew he could escape and save his own hide, but he knew that would only result in the deaths of the people he had now spent much time with. Chun Hu, Lin He, they'd all die a gruesome death. Lin Weiwei had been safe in the armor, but that too was now riddled with cracks. It wouldn't be long before that broke, exposing her to the ravenous hordes of insects. Bauer continued looking in the same direction, not bothering to summon the gourd. Han Sen suddenly heard an explosion in the sky above. A shockwave followed, almost knocking the fighters off their feet. It was a howl, and it was familiar. It was reminiscent of the howling of a wolf, but it wasn't quite the same. When they were on Ghost Mountain, the purple wolf super creature heard this sound and left Han Sen and his people be. Han Sen suddenly thought he might receive protection from the creatures after the howl. But the howl, as loud as it was, meant whatever made it was close. Han Sen wasn't sure what would happen next. And yet, nothing did. After a moment of anticipation, the bugs merely continued their onslaught without reprieve. It was disappointing, to say the least. But in the next second, silver lightning tore the skies asunder. Its presence quickly surprised everyone, knocking them down to the ground. As their hope had just started to wane, silver lightning descended from the sky like a river. The bugs in the path of those lethal webs of wind-borne fire were destroyed. Needless to say, it was shocking. Huddled together, everywhere outside their small portion of land was being ravaged by what felt like world-ending chaos. All the bugs that sought to kill them were promptly electrocuted. No way, a thought flashed through Han Sen's mind, but it was so crazy, he wasn't sure whether or not he was a fool to believe it. There was a small shadow in the direction Bauer was looking. It was headed towards them, emerging from beyond the streams of lightning. It was a small, silver fox. It approached them slowly, with grace and elegance. No lightning touched it. It was as if the curtain of silver fire parted for its entrance. No way, Han Sen was speechless. Han Sen now understood why the Wolf King left them alone, and why the creatures had all started to be nice towards him. It was because something had been watching over him the entire time. "Little Silver," Han Sen shouted, running to greet his old friend. The lightning broke away for Han Sen's approach. He dropped to his knees before the fox and planted a big kiss on the much-missed creature's forehead. Then, he ruffled the fur on his head. The silver fox shoved his muzzle towards him and licked Han Sen's hands. Then, he buried his head in Han Sen's chest. Bauer squinted her eyes, looking furious at the silver fox. She seemed jealous that something else was obtaining Han Sen's love. The bugs had all gone. When the silver fox looked at Bauer, it looked as if there was friction in both their eyes and an ignition of sparks. But 1 second later, they looked away from each other. Fortunately, Han Sen did not notice this brief standoff. It was best that nothing spoiled the moment for him. Han Sen had wanted to discard the gourd once before, and had gone so far as to throw it away. But it was the silver fox that picked it up and brought it back, indicating Han Sen should hold on to it. Strangely, after the occupant of the gourd emerged and met the person who had given it a father, they did not seem friendly. Han Sen wished to say something to the silver fox, but suddenly, there was another explosion. A giant, golden bug emerged from the ground in a haze of soil. Its lower body was like that of a snake, whereas its upper body was plated with a carapace that was not unlike a centipede. The creature's head was like a scorpion, and a stinger-tipped tail swung from its back. It looked evil, like a demon freed from hell itself. Amidst the golden light that reflected from its shiny plating, the hideous creature roared. Chun Hu was grabbed and pulled across the disheveled field. As he went, soil and grass stained his clothing. After a roar, the golden bug's tail started to move. It swayed from left to right, as if it was taking aim at Han Sen. Boom! 9 streaks of golden light were cast towards Han Sen, which twisted the very composure of space. The silver fox leapt in front of Han Sen, amassing a massive vortex of silver power. It transformed back into the fierce lightning fox it could be. Before the golden beam could reach its target, the silver fox roared as a big beam of silver lightning blazed back to counter it. Silver lightning burst out of the silver fox and collided with the golden light. Boom! The golden light was fractured, and in a second, the atmosphere exploded around them in a blinding flash. A 1-mile-wide hole formed in the ground, and aside from Han Sen and Bauer, everyone was blown away. The streaks of the silver fox's lightning filled the exhibit of destruction, suppressing all the golden bug sought to do. Try as it might to break that oppressive power, the golden bug could not. All it could do was flail around helplessly. The silver fox's fur gleamed. A silver aura formed around him, and it became brighter and brighter. It culminated in a wretched bullet of silver lightning. His target, the insect aggressor, shrieked wildly in agony. Lin He was frozen as he watched the scene unfold. Even Han Sen was shocked. The silver fox hadn't been in the third god's sanctuary for very long, but he had already amassed a terrifying amount of power. He had managed to alter the minds and desires of the super creatures of Ghost Mountain, and promptly came to Han Sen's aid on the verdant expanse. Of course, this wealth of power wasn't entirely down to the silver fox's own prowess. The silver fox had opened 9 of his gene locks, but he had done so through the help of other super creatures. It was through their aid that he managed to open so many gene locks so quickly, and it was how he had obtained such fierce powers already. The reason Silver Fox had received such treatment was his rarity. He had become widely respected throughout the creature kingdom, and that was down to his healing abilities. Many injured creatures had kindly received the Silver Fox's healing. He was proficient with this talent, and grievous injuries were healed in no time at all. It was that which earned him this great respect amongst creatures. Of course, only having 9 gene locks open meant he could not even beat the white snake if it came down to a fight between the two. Han Sen had 9 gene locks open, as well, and when bringing fitness into the equation, the two were well balanced. Just like Han Sen, the Silver Fox's fitness had not been able to keep up with the number of open gene locks. So, even in the third god's shelter, they'd make for a remarkable duo. Boom! The golden bug let out a shrill scream. It hastily dug back underground and disappeared, leaving behind stains of gold blood. The silver fox looked like a simple fox again. It trotted over to Han Sen and started rubbing his head against Han Sen's legs again, just like he used to. Han Sen picked the silver fox back up in his arms and said to him, "Well done." Bauer was sucking her dummy extra hard upon seeing this. She was most certainly not happy. No one dared remain in the area. Quickly, Han Sen and his party moved on. They eyed the silver fox with slight wariness because of the power they had seen him wield. He was quite a scary thing. They looked at Han Sen with such strangeness too. Han Sen was bringing it along with them, as if it was a pet. It was difficult to imagine what might happen to a man, should they incite the ire of the fox. Han Sen had raised the silver fox since its birth, though, and there was no possible chance it would attack him. The only downside to the silver fox's presence was its tendency to keep creatures at bay. While this trait had its benefits, it made trying to hunt a touch more difficult. But, after the golden bug was chased off with its injuries, it did not show up again, thankfully. After another 2 weeks of travel, the group stumbled across humans. There were 3 of them, and they seemed to be collecting grass. At the sight of them, the group was made extremely happy. If there were humans there, it might mean that there was a human shelter nearby. When the 3 people saw Han Sen, they too looked happy. And without delay, both groups met up for a chat. This is not a human shelter. Chunhu was disappointed. The eldest man amongst the 3 was a fellow called Zhao Xian. He told them, "There aren't many humans here, but we belong to a royal spirit shelter. It's called the Sword Furnace Shelter." Lin He said, "Are there any other human shelters around?" Zhao Xian regretfully informed them, "No, this area is under the control of spirits. It would be best if you return wherever you came from, lest the spirit become aware of your presence." Lin He and Lin Weiwei looked at each other. They were saddened, Upon hearing they had still not reached a location where they might safely settle down, Han Sen asked, "Do you know of a place called Thorn Forest?" Han Sen needed to know where he was in order to let Moment Queen move the shelter. They all shook their heads, much to Han Sen's disappointment. Immediately, he asked a follow-up question. "Do you know if there is a king-class shelter nearby?" Everyone's eyes lit up upon hearing this question. If there was no king-class shelter, there was a chance they could claim the royal shelter for themselves. They most certainly had enough power between Han Sen and his silver fox. Zhao Xian shook his head and informed them, "I only know this is a royal shelter, and it's fairly remote. I don't believe there are any other shelters in the immediate vicinity." "Brother Han, let's do this," Chen Hu and a few others said. It had been too long since any of them had gone to the Alliance, and they all wanted the opportunity to see their family and friends again. Uncle San and Wei Wei, what do you think?
Han Sen asked.
"Go ahead. If this doesn't work out in the long run, we can retreat to the Alliance forever." Lin He spoke with hefty gravity. "If we let this opportunity pass us by, who knows when our next chance at a place of sanctuary will be?" Lin Weiwei said. Zhao Xian looked at the party in shock, and he asked, "What are you guys talking about?" "We are talking about becoming the new owners of Sword Furnace Shelter," Han Sen answered.
No.
"Even if you do take down this shelter, it ultimately belongs to Sword Palace Shelter. If they send reinforcements here," Zhao Xian quickly told them, "then I'll deal with them and take Sword Palace Shelter for myself as well." Han Sen spoke calmly, with perfect confidence. "Brother Zhao, do you think they can do what they say they can?" Zhao Xian and the others hid amongst some bushes. While they watched Han Sen, the youngest of the three asked Zhao Xian the question. "They sound confident, so they definitely possess some manner of strength. But even if they can take down this royal shelter, I'm not sure they have the strength to take down Sword Palace Shelter." Zhao Xian paused for a minute, and then said, "Still, for now, if they can just manage to break the spirit stone here in Sword Furnace Shelter, we'll be free. Then let us hope for the best and pray they are successful," the young man said, his eyes also resting on Han Sen. The three of them held their hands and prayed after this. If the group was not successful in liberating the shelter, their betrayal might later be found out. If it was, then the three of them who were under contract would most assuredly be given a torturous death. After Han Sen and his people entered the shelter, the noise of explosions, clanging weaponry, and the shrieks and war cries of battle sounded from within the walls. The three of them sweated in anticipation. It didn't last for very long, and after a short while of audible fighting, the city fell silent. "Brother Zhao, why is it all quiet? Were they all killed?" the young man asked. "I don't think so." Zhao Xian wasn't entirely sure. It was strange, though. They had only been inside for a short while, so how could the battle have come to an end so soon? The fear of the group being unsuccessful lingered on the minds of the three, and the idea that Han Sen might have already conquered the shelter in such a short time seemed too silly for them to even consider. All of a sudden, a swordsman appeared from out of the gate. His build was heavy, and they recognized his figure all too well. It was a spirit of Sword Furnace Shelter. "We are done for," Zhao Xian quietly muttered. He hadn't expected them to be defeated so soon. The two young men had hoped, more than anything, to return to the Alliance if they had been freed. But now, they didn't think that was happening anytime soon. But then, after watching the spirit with bated breath, the tension in their contorted expressions loosened. They couldn't believe it. Another person came out from behind the gates of the shelter, and as he stepped past, the spirit moved aside like a servant. When Zhao Xian squinted to take a better look, that person was the young man who had told them his people could take the shelter and give them back their freedom. The royal spirit is obeying him? Zhao Xian looked amazed. How could he have achieved all that so quickly? The young man was in awe. Han Sen bid for the three to emerge from the bushes and enter the shelter. After coming inside, they were able to confirm that Han Sen had indeed conquered the shelter and asserted control. The bodies of slain creatures were strewn about everywhere. The shelter had been populated with a large sum of mutant creatures, but now they were all dead. "Who are you people?" Zhao Xian asked in shock. If they possessed the power to oh so easily bring down Sword Furnace Shelter, they couldn't have been an ordinary bunch of adventurers. You aren't aware of what President Ji's son-in-law looks like? Chunhu smiled. You are Han Sen? The young person exclaimed with much glee. Zhao Xian had been in the third god's sanctuary for far too long, though, so the name Han Sen didn't ring any bells. But now, they could all use the teleporter. It had been many years since Zhao Xian had been to the Alliance. He had a lot of catching up to do. Lin He and his group were supposed to stay for a while and protect the shelter, but Han Sen allowed them to return first. With the Silver Fox and Bauer there, even if Sword Palace Shelter came quickly for retribution, there'd be little the other royal shelter could do against the combined might of those two. Han Sen gave them their places and explained to them what should be done in the event hostile forces came to the shelter. Then, he too returned to the Alliance. It had been a while since he was last in touch with his mother and Ji Yanran, and so he sought to allay any fears they may have had for his well-being. Inside a giant city, one that sat in the center of the glorious emerald expanses, many royal spirits had come together for a meeting. The leader amongst them wore green-plated armor, and he spoke to them all. A swordsman's spirit approached another royal spirit and whispered in his ear. When he heard the whispered words, the spirit's face changed. My son, what is wrong? Holy Sword Emperor asked. Ghost Sword was only just a royal spirit. He hadn't become a king's spirit yet, but he was the strongest of Holy Sword Emperor's sons. With the possibility that, in time, he might be able to become a king's spirit, his father loved him dearly. Father, a few humans stormed Sword Furnace Shelter and took it from me. We should send reinforcements to slay them, Ghost Sword said, then gestured to the swordsman, who promptly left. Okay, then. Holy Sword Emperor did not think this matter was too concerning. In that place, only super creatures could pose a threat to them. Humans were weaklings, and not a force worth worrying about. Mostly, though, Holy Sword Emperor's placid reaction to the news was because he was in a good mood. He had just been the recipient of a treasure. It was given to him by an emperor spirit from Phoenix Desert. With that treasure, he had a chance of transcending his own class to that of an emperor. The power of an emperor was not far off that of a berserk super creature, and it was half a tier higher than that of a king's spirit. Spirits that had open Tenjin locks mostly moved on to the fourth god's sanctuary. The treasure he had received was from an emperor spirit that had gone to the fourth god's sanctuary. It was a very beneficial gift for spirits such as Holy Sword Emperor. He hadn't previously hoped he could achieve 10 open gene locks, but now, he did. A swordsman approached Ghost Sword and whispered to him again. Upon hearing what the messenger said, his face turned green. He stood up. After a time spent in the Alliance, Han Sen returned to the sanctuary. As soon as he arrived, Bauer leapt up to kiss his cheek and say, Father, I missed you. I missed you too. Han Sen kissed her and then went off, looking for the silver fox. Han Sen used his Dongxian aura and found the fox lying atop the shelter's ramparts, just above the gate. Han Sen took Bauer with him to where the silver fox was and said, Little Silver, I'm back. There is no need to guard so fiercely anymore. The silver fox just continued staring in the direction he had been. Han Sen could tell the silver fox was concerned about something, but all that did was make Han Sen worry, too.
Han Sen frov ned.
Ghost Mountain was in the direction the silver fox faced. Caringly, Han Sen went to stroke the silver fox's head and ask him, Do you miss your friends? Han Sen believed the silver fox might have missed the fellow creatures back on Ghost Mountain, as they had treated him well for a long time. Before he could receive a response, though, Han Sen's attention was snatched by the sudden sound of a cry. It came from Ghost Mountain. The silver fox stood up in alarm, paying extra attention to the cry. He approached Han Sen's legs and rubbed his head against them. Acknowledging something was wrong, Han Sen stroked the silver fox's face and asked, What is it? Gently, the silver fox crooned as an answer. He jumped up, licked Han Sen's cheek, and then jumped off of the shelter's wall. The silver fox started to run in the direction of Ghost Mountain, but as it went, it repeatedly looked back at Han Sen. Han Sen did not delay in going after the silver fox, but Little Silver kept on howling back at Han Sen, who sought to give chase, as if he was telling Han Sen to stay back and not follow him back to Ghost Mountain. What's wrong, Little Silver? You can tell me. Han Sen did not heed the silver fox's warnings and continued pursuing him. Bauer was left behind in the meantime, up on the ramparts of the shelter. Han Sen thought about why the silver fox might not have come to see him in the very beginning, when he was up on Ghost Mountain. The silver fox had called off the super creature wolf. It was strange how he had only shown up after they exited the mountain. Howl. The silver fox tried to warn Han Sen off and get him to stop following. Little Silver, is someone trying to bully you? Are you being threatened? What is that far-off cry? Han Sen increased his speed to catch up with the silver fox. Although Little Silver was not a human, he was a creature Han Sen had raised since its birth. At one point, the silver fox was his most trusted ally and sidekick. He was family to Han Sen, and he couldn't just let the fox run off into danger. It was okay if the silver fox wanted to go back there to be with the creatures. Han Sen wouldn't have forced him to stay with him if that was the concern. But if something was forcing the silver fox to do something against his will, Han Sen wouldn't stand for it. Little Silver slowed down due to Han Sen's repeated calls, but the crying noise from Ghost Mountain started up again. Little Silver barked at Han Sen, and then, with a bolt of lightning, ran off. The silver fox was incredibly quick, and Han Sen had no chance of following him. The creature was going to leave his range of vision in no time. With 8 gene locks open, though, Han Sen did his best to try and catch up. He had fallen behind, yes, but he still continued on his way to Ghost Mountain. That was where the silver fox was headed, after all. The silver fox heard the upset howling again and stopped in his tracks. Seeing him stop in the distance put a smile back on Han Sen's face. But as he neared the silver fox again and was close to catching up, Little Silver electrified him. The silver fox barked at Han Sen, commanding that he stop following. Bringing himself back up to his feet, Han Sen was not mad at his behavior. He said, "If you are willingly going back, I won't stop you. But if someone is making you do something against your own will, I'm not leaving your side." Boom! The silver fox shot Han Sen with another bolt of lightning, but after, he looked a little remorseful. He seemed to have been touched by Han Sen's words, despite his initial reaction. Shrugging off the pain, Han Sen continued to approach the silver fox. Little Silver couldn't bring himself to shock Han Sen the third time, so he just barked, ran, and leapt up into Han Sen's chest. "Little Silver, I don't want you to leave me." Han Sen stroked the silver fox's head with much love. Little Silver licked his dear master's cheeks and barked quietly, as if he wished to speak with him in a common language. But suddenly, the silver fox jumped away from Han Sen and made all his fur stand on end. Han Sen suddenly felt a terrible presence drawing near. Turning to take a look at where it was coming from, he saw a black shadow approaching them from across the field. The shadow was very slow, but every step made Han Sen feel as if the very world was under threat. It was as if the world was shrinking, the nearer it drew. Han Sen could sense a terrifying power residing within that black shadow. Now, Han Sen believed he understood the reason why the silver fox had not revealed his presence as soon as he probably wanted to. It wasn't that the silver fox did not want to be with Han Sen. It was this shadow that was stopping him. He only revealed himself when he did because it had been a life and death moment for Han Senator. The assault of those bugs out on the plains could have ended poorly for all the humans involved. Staring at the scary shadow, Han Sen thought even the intimidation of the snake paled in comparison to it. When the shadow arrived, it felt as if the entire expanse had been veiled with a cloak of darkness. The creature was a fox. It was different than the silver fox, not only in that its coat was black, but it had a look of murder in its eyes. It was evil. It had 9 tails that wagged strangely, and it gave the illusion of a warped dimension. The 9-tailed fox approached like a demon, and its oppressive appearance made Han Sen feel he could drop to the ground at any given moment. The eyes of the phantom fox were frightening. The sockets were where they should have been, but they were empty, sunken and empty. The fox looked at Han Sen, and as it did, he felt a weight of doom press on his shoulders. The tyrannical feelings it exuded were suffocating, so much so, Han Sen felt short of breath. Han Sen did not have an 8th sense, but he knew all too well that the fox wanted to murder him. He felt as if he was encountering a twisted, vengeful ghost from the beyond. And it was then that it hit him. Perhaps there was a reason the area was called Ghost Mountain. Is this why Ghost Mountain is called Ghost Mountain? Is it because of this ghost-like fox? Han Sen mulled to himself. Howl. The silver fox cried out at the ghost fox, as if it was begging it to let Han Sen walk away. But it seemed as if the ghost fox did not care. It looked furious. Undoubtedly angry Han Sen had taken the silver fox away from it. Seeing the ghost fox approach, nearer and nearer, Little Silver straightened his hair with a charge of electricity. He growled at the ghost fox, as if he was telling it to stay away. The ghost fox was irritated by Little Silver's behavior, and it let out a horrid shriek. After it was over, its tail sprang outwards to attack Han Sen. The silver fox was shocked, so it unleashed a barrage of silver lightning at the ghost fox in retaliation. Strangely, the lightning flashed through the body of the ghost fox and only scorched the ground behind it. It was as if the ghost fox was truly a ghost. The silver fox unleashed more and more lightning, each discharge being stronger than the last. Try as he might, though, not a single one impacted or dealt damage to the shape of the foe that opposed them. Han Sen turned into a phoenix and leapt towards the ghost fox. But after unleashing a number of attacks, nothing touched the ghost fox. Han Sen felt like cowering in the ghost's intimidating shadow. Suddenly, Han Sen behaved as if he was possessed. Black smoke rose from his flames, and his eyes turned black as well. Han Sen's hands rose up of their own accord and placed themselves on his own neck. Then, he vigorously tried to strangle himself. You deserve it. Ha ha ha. Han Sen squeezed his own neck with tremendous strength, wheezing out a cackle whenever he could. He had gone psychotic. A tick-tick sound came from the neck, and it sounded as if it was going to snap any second beneath the horrid pressure that was being put upon it. Han Sen had never had to deal with a power such as this before. Only his consciousness was free. Everything else about him was under the control of the ghost fox who had disappeared into him. The silver fox howled in fright over what had happened to his master. He couldn't do anything to save him, and he could only run around in circles. The ghost fox had possessed Han Sen, and even though it was vulnerable now, if he attacked, he'd be harming his master. Little Silver's eyes turned red, and it began kowtowing before the ghost fox. I told you, I'd grant him safe passage across Ghost Mountain, only if you remained my slave. You broke your end of the bargain, and now he has to die. Han Sen's mouth spoke the words that the ghost fox desired, and did so with a spooky, empty tone that was devoid of all emotion. The silver fox had no idea what to do. He didn't know if there was anything he could do. All he did was beg and beg for the safety of his master. Little Silver, don't beg. He isn't worthy enough to be your master. Suddenly, Han Sen had managed to regain some control. The ghost fox was surprised at the resilience of its host. It had never expected that a possessed human could summon the will to regain command of their voice. Not even super creatures could resist the powers of the ghost fox, so how a human had managed to do so was unfathomable. To the ghost fox, the 1,700 fitness the human possessed was incredibly weak. Not wanting to risk him regaining any more control, the ghost fox decided to kill him outright. The ghost fox strengthened its power, but strangely, it could not corrupt any more of Han Sen's body. A holy light came out from Han Sen, and it seemed to be purifying and negating the effects of the black smoke. This humble light grew, until the darkness that surrounded him was wholly vanquished. In posse, the ghost fox sought to squeal a few words using Han Sen's mouth, but his attempt was cut short by the severing of the corruption. Han Sen's black hair became a bright, stunning white gown, and it grew so long that it brushed the emerald grass. His body was beaming with a holy light. The 9-gene-locked Super King spirit body was increasing in strength and magnitude. The dark presence in him was ejected, and the form of the ghost fox returned. It looked at Han Sen in utter shock. How dare you make Little Silver cry? You know what? You deserve it. Han Sen's eyes burned with the brightness of stars. A fist, imbued with the same power, was thrown towards the wretched ghost fox. The ghost fox squealed as if it was trying to say, I am indestructible, you are nothing. But in the next second, Han Sen's mighty fist was burying itself deep into the ghost fox's face. It annihilated the composure of its shadowy form and sent the beast flying. The ghost fox wore an expression of complete incomprehension. It couldn't believe the human had actually managed to punch it. Han Sen did not hesitate for 1 second, though. His anger was like the sudden eruption of a volcano, and he moved over to deliver follow-up blows. Approaching the fox, his arms swung wildly. Pang! Pang! Han Sen punched the nine-tailed fox repeatedly. Blood squirted out with each brutish impact like flowers in the air. The ghost fox was in shock at how the tables had turned on it. Han Sen was an oppressive tyrant, standing in front of it, beating it senseless. The crazy man's barrage of punches ruined its body into a sickly, disfigured mess. All it could do in response was scream, shriek, and squeal in agony and fright. D. Han Sen's fists were faster than any eye could track. Catcha! A fist opened up and grabbed one of the fox's tails. It ripped the tail off and cast it away like some joke. The nine-tailed fox could not hold back its pained cries. It tried to raise its claws in a hopeless defense, thinking it might be able to get away. But Han Sen's fists of fury were too powerful. The nails and paws were shattered with no additional effort, and then he teleported in front of the fox's face. Catcha! Han Sen grabbed the fox by the neck and reached around for another one of its tails. Effortlessly, another tail was torn from its flesh. The ghost fox was in shock. It had resided on the mountain for countless years, but it had never been this scared before. Han Sen was like a demon. Its ghost body was useless against the raging madman. The fox couldn't fathom trying to fight back anymore, and all it wanted to do was run off and retreat to some cave where it could lick its wounds. Every step it tried to take, Han Sen was there with it. Another tail was ripped off. Every time a tail was ripped off, it lost its shadowy, phantom-like illusion. When it hit the ground, it was an average, fluffy foxtail. Han Sen chased the fox for 300 miles. Over the course of this distance, the ghost fox was beaten until it continuously spilled blood from its mouth, and countless wounds checkered its body. Every now and again, a tail was ripped off and cast away, too. When Han Sen reached the last tail, the ghost fox no longer looked like it had before. It had lost its translucent look and simply became a frail, beaten, black fox. With Taya, Han Sen did not show any remorse or mercy. He cut the head of the fox clean off, from a strike that started low. The upward momentum sent it barreling through the air. /update by. The ghost fox Han Sen had been savagely beating on was killed then and there. It wasn't in any particularly flashy fashion, just a clean, simple severing of its head. Super creature nine-tail ghost fox killed.
No beast soul gun.
Consume its flesh to gain 0 to 10 super geno points randomly. You may also collect the life geno essence. After killing the nine-tail fox, Han Sen exited his Super King spirit mode. It was incredibly draining on him, and he had been sapped of all strength. Now, he could barely lift a finger. His bones felt like glass, as if they were fragile and ready to shatter. His flesh felt stressed, as if the entire composition of his body had been stretched. He was like butter, scraped over too much bread. His life force was weak now. It took him a whole hour of Super King spirit mode to kill the fox. If he hadn't figured out how to kill it by tearing off its tails, he wouldn't have been able to finish it off. The reason Han Sen was able to make a comeback and kill it, though, was all down to the ghost fox's underestimation of his power. If the fox had not tried to possess and toy with him for a while, he could have been outright killed before being given the opportunity to fight back. If the fox had tried to kill him properly, it all would have been over for him. Han Sen had more than a few tricks up his sleeve, and the ghost fox had no idea he was capable of unleashing such vast amounts of power. The fox had been in charge of that mountain for countless ages. By killing the master of that massive region, it finally made him realize just how powerful and fortuitous he was to possess a Super King spirit body. This hurts way too much. Whichever way Han Sen chose to move, it felt as if he was pressing his body against 1,000 knives. The silver fox had done nothing for a while. He had only followed Han Sen, staring at him with his mouth agape. The ghost fox had been wickedly powerful for many years, and heaven knew how many good things it had eaten over the course of its time as supreme commander of Ghost Mountain. A super creature that had reached its 9th tier would most certainly not have been able to kill it. The fact that it was so far ahead of every other creature there was why it had been in charge. Even the silver fox had been forced to become its slave. No one could have expected it to have been so simply killed by a human like that. Han Sen summoned Thorn Baron, asking her to bring the fox's corpse with her. Back in the shelter, he rested the following day and night. His body had moderately improved, but he was still very weak, and there'd be a while to go before he could make a full recovery. Not even the silver fox's powers of healing were enough to fix him. Han Sen had tried to use his own holy light to heal himself, but it was futile. It seemed as if only time possessed what it took to recover, this time. The silver fox brought out the dragon's saliva Han Sen had been gifted. After eating a bit, Han Sen felt much better. Still, with not much going on, Han Sen thought it'd be a waste to eat it now. Its recovery benefits could prove very useful in the future. Han Sen dug up the life geno essence. The silver fox circled him as he did so. With the saliva drooling from his mouth, it was obvious little Silver wanted some. With a wry smile, Han Sen gave the life geno essence to the silver fox. He barked after accepting it, then ran off to enjoy it. After trying to eat some of the ghost fox's tail, Han Sen found it to be inedible. So, he summoned the disloyal knight and got him to eat it. The disloyal knight gobbled up all the meat it could, and was then sent back to the Sea of Soul. This time, it began to shine with a green light. It was evolving. Now that the ghost fox had been slain, Han Sen believed he could ransack Ghost Mountain alongside Little Silver. But the silver fox, after receiving the life geno essence, disappeared for a few days. Han Sen was still awfully weak, and was in no condition for solo travel. He thought the silver fox might have gone to the ghost fox's den, but Han Sen had no idea where that might have been. Since it was too dangerous for him to venture there in such a weak state of body, he didn't dare leave the shelter. After a period of rest and recovery, Han Sen found himself nearing full recuperation. But just as he was alerted to the nearby presence of a swathe of angry creatures and spirits. The leader was clad in black iron armor, and he wielded a black iron greatsword. He rode atop a lion, whose fur was also black. Many powerful creatures and spirits trailed behind him, as a wake. They had come to the front of the shelter once before, but this was while Han Sen was back in the Alliance. The silver fox had been there at the time, and he managed to ward them off by incinerating a few. Learning a high number of creatures and spirits had come for them, Lin He and Lin Weiwei returned to the Alliance so they could fetch Han Sen. After returning to the sanctuary, Han Sen picked up Bauer and ascended one of the shelter's watchtowers. There, he used his Dongxian aura to measure the strength of those that sought to oppose him. Amongst the collective that had now gathered in front of the shelter, Han Sen espied the presence of a small sacred blood creature that looked like a pigeon. This pleased him. Sacred blood creatures that were small in size were quite a rarity. He could finish that pigeon in one sitting, easy. There were a few other sacred blood creatures there as well, but they were too big and none tickled his fancy in particular. The second smallest was the black lion, but a preliminary examination suggested it would be inedible for him. Contemptible humans, how dare you assault and claim my shelter for your own? Lay down your arms and submit to slavery, and I will spare your lives. This is the only offer for such mercy you will receive, Ghost Sword Prince coldly proclaimed. What do we do? Should we return to the Alliance? Zhao Xian's face seemed disturbed. Don't worry, it's only a royal spirit. After that, Han Sen turned his head to address the spirit below. He said, HM, this seems rote. How about we spice things up with a duel? If you defeat me, then by all means, enslave us all. Fine, Ghost Sword Prince agreed. Han Sen had embarrassed him, directly in front of his father, no less. Killing them all in a crude siege would have been too simple for Ghost Sword Prince, so a duel for the regaining of the honor he thought he had lost was a concept he rather enjoyed. Ghost Sword did not think much of humans. He thought they weren't very powerful, due to most of the human population being mere slaves in the third god's sanctuary. And he wasn't entirely wrong. Humans had become slaves to the overwhelming strength of spirits all across the third god's sanctuary, and humans of some renown were in very short supply. /update by Luo Haiteng was a human of renown, but his time had come and gone. Han Sen drew his Taya sword and leapt down to the grassy fields below. He said, "Come on, show me what you've got." No human could talk to him like that, or so he thought. Being addressed in such a boorish fashion enraged him, so he spared no time in trying to swing his black iron greatsword down on Han Sen. It was a Geno weapon he wielded. It might not have had the glow or sheen that was typical of such weaponry, but it had a dark and imposing figure. The sword itself looked powerful and unbreakable.
Young.
Han Sen used his Blood Pulse Sutra to perform a guard with Taya. The force that came down on the sword was tremendous, and it knocked Han Sen back about 10 feet. Still, Taya was left without a scratch. You must have a death wish to willingly fight one such as I. After Ghost Sword Prince finished speaking, he lunged forward for another strike. Han Sen knew his power was weaker than the prince's, who seemed reliant on the use of raw, physical damage. But since that was only one element of the fight, it didn't concern him. Han Sen could have used Super King Spirit Mode, but he didn't want to. He thought it'd be a waste of time and strength, using it on a foe he didn't deem worthy enough to be the recipient of its might. Han Sen used Arrow and Double Fly and attacked like a dive-bombing phoenix. Sword Ghost's power was no joke, and each strike could have proven fatal if they met with their target. Fortunately, Han Sen was able to dodge each and every one, using stealth to insert hits of his own. Ghost Sword Prince felt as if he was doing battle with the air. Try as he might, he only broke the sky. He couldn't touch Han Sen. Han Sen was silent the entire time, though. He was focused right now, and he was in the zone, entirely concentrated on honing and improving the skills he employed to fight the spirit. It was difficult to find an opponent that was of a similar level as him, but here one was. If Han Sen had to take a guess, he'd assume the spirit had managed to unlock 8 gene locks. He was nigh the perfect opponent to train and spar with. Wei Wei, it looks like Han Sen can make use of both Heavenly Go and 7 Twist, Lin He said, correctly determining what moves Han Sen was making use of. Lin Wei Wei nodded, saying he learned Heavenly Go from Queen. As for 7 Twist, I have no idea where he learned that or from whom. Lin He, as he continued to watch, said, Little Han is quite a talented young chap. Even though he has opened 1 gene lock, less than the spirit he battles with, he can keep up just fine and surpass his opponent. Han Sen is clearly winning. He really is the best of the best. Where did that fox go, I wonder? Lin Wei Wei was worried about Ghost Sword Prince not keeping to his promise if Han Sen won the fight. If the creatures in his command still attacked, she thought the fox would be of great service to them. The fox isn't here, and if that spirit does not stay true to his word and attacks us anyway, I'm not entirely sure we can hold this place. Chunhu had the same worry. And just as Chunhu said this, Ghost Sword Prince commanded his followers to commence an attack on the shelter. Han Sen wished to spar with Ghost Sword Prince for a while longer, but the snake had commanded his troops to commence an attack on the shelter. Han Sen opened his 8th gene lock, which made Taya gleam with a dark purple light and look like calcified blood. He had managed to collect many sacred Geno points up to this point, so he'd be able to last a while longer. Taya's blade swung right before Ghost Sword's face, and then, with a sudden blaze of additional speed, Han Sen kicked things up a notch. His fierce blade accelerated, forcing Ghost Sword to raise his greatsword and attempt to block.
Young.
But the greatsword did nothing to repel Taya. In an instant, the mighty greatsword was broken. Taya continued its forward thrust, directly towards Ghost Sword's chest. Taya was an incredibly strong sword, but its strength was determined by its wielder. If Han Sen wasn't half the man he was, the blade's strength would most likely have been similar to Z Steel. If you were a weak person, Taya would have been useless. The Blood Pulse Sutra imbued the blade with the power of blood, and it bolstered its strength by a huge degree. It lent it the mighty force that drove the current attack. Ghost Sword was too pompous to expect such a thing to occur, and so, it was too late for him to evade it. Just as this happened, the pigeon on the spirit's shoulder flashed with a green light. It flew down to shield its master's heart. Awesome! Han Sen was made even happier. He had done all this for the sole purpose of killing that creature. Blood sprayed everywhere as the blade severed the bird's head from its neck. Sacred blood creature green falcon killed.
No beast soul gun.
Consume its flesh to gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points randomly. Ghost Sword's disposition only curdled after this, though. Enraged, he drew a long sword to replace his now broken greatsword and attacked Han Sen madly. Han Sen's body looked red, but he did not dodge the attack. Instead, he allowed the long sword to pierce directly into his chest. He didn't fall, though. Instead, he looked cold, as if this had all been predicted beforehand. It was as if the entire fight had been calculated already. He dashed forward and brought himself directly in front of Ghost Sword. This scared Ghost Sword. He had expected to be able to cut Han Sen in half, but instead, he felt his own head depart his body. In Han Sen's hand, droplets of a red substance dripped from Taia's blood-soaked blade. The army that had accompanied Ghost Sword all fled, as he was zapped back to his spirit stone. In the manic scramble of creatures that were tripping over themselves to escape, Lin He and a few others ran out to nab a few easy kills. They had never been so happy. They used to be terrified of fighting, and they had only just escaped the coming of a spirit that sought to conquer them and had, in fact, succeeded. It was a great relief to see victory achieved so easily. In the past, it took a large amount of planning with a high volume of people to secure a win, but this was swift and only required the help of a few individuals. It was unbelievable. At midnight, in Holy Sword Shelter, a man pounded a stone door with one hand, held a torch in the other. The door opened, and the man went inside and closed it behind him. "Brother Seven, why are you here?" a bearded man asked. Brother Seven set the torch in a wall mount, and with much excitement, said, "Juanhao, Holy Sword Emperor was just yelling at his son. The one he proclaims to love so much?" Qin Juanhao asked. "Yes, that one. He failed in trying to reclaim his own shelter." Brother Seven said. "Which spirit was able to beat a spirit that has 8 of his gene locks open?" Qin Juanhao wondered. "It's not even a spirit. It was a human. It was one of us." Brother Seven couldn't quell the giddy excitement that drenched his speech. "Are you serious? How is such a thing possible?" Qin Juanhao's facial expression suggested that he was struggling to believe what he had just been told. Brother Seven, finally starting to get a grip on his composure, explained, "I don't know, but this actually happened. I got the story from the horse's mouth. I heard Ghost Sword talk about it himself." "That is good news, then. Finally, humanity seems to be accomplishing something in this place. I must tell you, though, this sounds like a person I'd very much like to meet," Qin Juanhao said. "I'm glad you say that, for I would very much like you to go meet with this person," Brother Seven said. "How can I even arrange such a meeting?" Qin Juanhao was stuck in this shelter, unable to leave. "I have an idea, but they are probably unaware of Holy Sword Emperor and what he is capable of. We have to warn this man, and the people that accompany him." Brother Seven paused, and then went on to say, "Holy Sword Emperor is on his way to Phoenix Desert. This is our window of opportunity to act. Now is the time we would do best to warn them." "But I can't leave," Qin Juanhao said. "I have a method, a way in which you can leave. But if you are caught, you will be in grave danger." Brother Seven now spoke with a tone of dark gravitas. "Danger means nothing to me, if it enables me to warn others and possibly save them," Qin Juanhao said with pride. Brother Seven nodded and went on to explain his plan, and then he said, "I must accompany Holy Sword Emperor. If you make it back to the Alliance, tell my wife I cannot return the favor." Qin Juanhao looked shocked and asked, "Is he going to Emperor Mountain?" "Yes, he can go there now with the gift he was given." Brother Seven now possessed a wry smile. Qin Juanhao quickly suggested, "Brother Seven, come with me. Perhaps we can return to the Alliance together." But Brother Seven shook his head and said, "You have to do this alone. You have a higher chance of making it by flying solo. If I come with you, they'll immediately come after me, and we'll both be killed." Qin Juanhao wished to say something, but Brother Seven interrupted him and said, "When you find these people, tell them to return to the Alliance. Otherwise, they'll never be given the chance to again." Brother Seven provided a map to Qin Juanhao and said, "This is a map I have drawn. I have worked on it for many years, and it is done from memory. It includes the location of God Mountain. If humanity ever goes for a full-blown war with spirits one day, this may be of great service. Brother Seven spoke as if he'd be dying soon, and he gave many of his secret possessions to Qin Juanhao. Han Sen, browsing the aisles of the supermarket, held Bauer in his arms. He had spent so much time in the sanctuary, returning to the conveniences of civilization made for a nice change of pace. Bauer and Han Sen each had an ice cream, and they were delicious.
Teacher que, Lanxi,
Han Sen caught sight of two people who were familiar to him. One of them was a very elegant woman. Her full name was Chu Wanga, and she was a lecturer at St. Paul College. The other woman was Chu Lanxi, who Han Sen had met in the Third God's sanctuary.
Han Sen.
They were both quite surprised. Han Sen was also surprised, especially at seeing them both together. They seemed rather close with each other. You two are good friends? Han Sen guessed, unsure of the exact nature of their relationship. Lanxi is my big sister. I didn't realize that you knew her.
Que Wange Smiled.
When I first came to the Third God's sanctuary, Lanxi helped me out a lot. I just didn't expect you both to be sisters.
Han Sen Smiled.
Chu Lanxi blushed and said, Are you sure it was I who helped you? It was thanks to you that Chu Ming and I were able to return here. Chu Wanga chimed in to say, Didn't you tell me it was Sanmu who helped you? I am Sanmu.
Han Sen Smiled.
Come to my home for dinner tonight, then. Our parents would really like to meet, greet, and thank the person who saved my sister, Chu Wanga said. There is no need for that, Han Sen said. I have wanted to do this for a long time. So, if you really aren't busy, I would much appreciate it if we could have a get-together, Chu Lanxi pleaded. All right, then. They had endured many hardships together, so Han Sen wasn't entirely against joining her for a night. Is that your daughter, by the way? She's cute, Chu Wanga asked.
Bao.
No, she's just a humanoid pet bee soul. I treat her as if she was my daughter, though. Han Sen had started to use that as an explanation for what Bauer was, masking her true, enigmatic identity. If it became known that Bauer was a creature of sorts, one that could actually come to the Alliance, people would undoubtedly freak out. A ruckus would ensue, all with Han Sen back in the limelight again. If there were other creatures that could come to the Alliance, things would be far more dangerous for humans. And what's more, he feared Bauer might be taken away by the government if her nature was exposed. As such, he kept it a secret. That must be quite rare. They looked at Bauer with much surprise. Bauer reached out and said, Beautiful aunties, hug me. Immediately, they were both smitten with Bauer. They did not mind that it was a pet beast soul, as they had been told, and were keen to treat it like any ordinary baby. While Bauer could be sweet and had the naivety of an actual child, after the time he had spent with her in the sanctuary, Han Sen had come to know that Bauer had an evil streak within her. She wasn't entirely innocent. Bauer could even command Moment Queen to do things for her. After Bauer's introduction to Chu Lanxi and Chu Wanga, the baby was able to obtain many things Han Sen usually forbade. She had put on a front of being as adorable as possible, getting the two she referred to as aunties to buy her many things. Much of this stuff was just junk food. Han Sen thought it was a waste, buying her such food. He believed it would be useless for her development. Furthermore, Han Sen didn't like spending too much, either. And with Bauer's belly being like a black hole, she could eat and never be satisfied. He couldn't risk spoiling her. But on this day, those two girls greatly enjoyed feeding Bauer whatever she requested. Have you been abusing her? Why is she so hungry? Chu Wanga stared at Han Sen with trepidation. Han Sen shrugged and thought to himself, It's all fun, lollipops and kisses for now. If only you had to take care of her for a few days, you'd understand how difficult she is to take care of. After their time shopping was over, Chu Wanga drove Han Sen and Bauer to their house. Their parents greeted Han Sen very passionately. They were so grateful Han Sen had been able to deliver Chu Lanxi back to the Alliance without harm after her many-year absence. While Han Sen was in deep discussion with her parents, Chu Lanxi took Bauer up to her room. Bauer, does this dress look good on me? Chu Lanxi asked, after placing Bauer on her bed.
No.
You're too old, Bauer said, with squinted eyes. Chu Lanxi froze, utterly dazed from the response she had received from a baby. Her attitude was most certainly different than when she was around Han's senator. It was as if her cuteness had entirely evaporated. You are so old. And to wear such old-fashioned clothes, it's no wonder you haven't married yet. You'll never wed anyone if you carry on like this. Bauer spoke with a deep, serious, and rough tone, all while she sucked her dummy. Chu Lanqi had not expected a pet baby to insult her this way. Bauer placed her little hands below her jaw and said, "Yeah, I don't think you'll ever get married. Of course, if you aren't against the concept, I can get my daddy to be your husband for a temporary period of time. You'll just have to buy me good stuff for the duration." Chu Lanqi was still frozen, with her wide eyes staring at Bauer. Bauer seemed to be adding something up with her fingers, and eventually, she said, "Daddy is popular, so this is going to cost you at least 200 ice creams." When Han Sen was ready to leave, the sisters looked at him strangely. They avoided eye contact and didn't even bid him goodbye. But before they left, Chu Lanqi gave a lot of food to Bauer. "Bauer, did you do something to offend your two Annies?"
Han Sen asked.
"I behaved," Bauer said, as she munched on jelly. Han Sen went home to rest for the next 2 days, but Lin Weiwei sent him a message. It told him that a person had come to the shelter and that he would like to meet Han Sen in the virtual community.